So the concept of this exhibition, F11 Digital Paintings for Full Screen, was something that actually interested me pre-pandemic. The idea of painting virtually or digitally in all different ways. And then, of course, with COVID and lockdown, it suddenly became very relevant as everyone tried to find a different way to bring their exhibitions or programming online. And some institutions already had a robust program, and some institutions have been trying to figure out how to do so. So this is the Derfner's first virtual exhibition. It is not thematic, it's conceptual. 10 artists are included in this show, and the best way to view the online exhibition, as I have on my screen right now, is to literally F11 to look at it full screen. If you're on mobile, it will adapt, but you can open each individual image separately, which is part of the idea of this show. So my idea for doing a virtual exhibition was to do something simple. I've seen everything from, three-dimensionally rendered exhibition spaces, as I'm sure you've all seen. There's different ways of doing that. So my thought was, instead of trying to recreate the experience of visiting a museum or gallery in person, which is no longer possible as much as it was. Some venues are open with limited capacity, or they're completely closed. And all of the platforms I've seen, you can sort of navigate through a three-dimensional space. It's a rendered environment. Some of those platforms are actual spaces that exist in real life that have been photographed, kind of like Google Street View, which has been around for a long time, but this is becoming more common. There's versions where there's an actual physical exhibition installed in a real space, gallery, and virtually can be reproduced into a rendered environment that you can navigate through your computer. Some online exhibitions have taken the form of just on-page content. So it's high resolution photographs of work, and it's curated on a web page. So one thing that I thought would be interesting is to almost invert this practice and have digital art that is best viewed on screen. So when you look at a piece in a virtual exhibition, that's one of the ones that I just described, the thing that would go through my mind is, well, I can't wait to see that in real life. I see the image, I can't wait to visit that exhibition in real life, or see that work, that physical work that exists in real life in person. So my thought was, what if we had a show where the original, the best way to view it is right there on your screen, full screen, and that's it. That's the real McCoy. I'm aware, and I go into this more in the essay, that digital works can be printed, can be made into prints, but the difference between viewing something on screen that was digitally created or created using a combination of physical materials, but the end result is a digital work, the screen is the museum. And that was the concept of the exhibition. So I'm going to move on. And like I said, if you're looking at the exhibition right now, you can see it on my screen, but if you also have your computer open, it's best viewed in desktop, as this says, F11 to view the entire screen. And as we go through, you can click on each image and it will enlarge. And I'll go through that and use examples of that as we're proceeding. There's also a link here to the exhibition catalog, which is also virtual on issue, which goes more into depth about the show and each of the artists. It is downloadable as a PDF if anyone would like that. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Elaine Chao. So Elaine's work was the only animated GIFs that I had seen that were interested me a great deal, since you can only see them move on screen. So putting these works into a printed format for the press release or for the catalog, how to translate that. So Elaine, if you'd like to go a little bit into your work, I'm going to click. So there we have full screen, and we can really get the full effect. So Elaine, if you'd just like to introduce yourself and speak a little bit about these works.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Elaine Chao. I'm an artist working in New York, New York. I was born in Queens, and I'm primarily a digital artist. However, the works that you see before you began as paintings, and I will explain why I was working with paintings and not purely within the digital medium. I was applying for several open calls and opportunities, and felt the pressure to have something exhibitable. And that pushed me into the mode of painting. So I was doing primarily paintings that I wanted to experiment with color and a gloss medium. So I was mixing acrylic with gloss gel and doing layers and layers of painting, encasing them in gloss gel to try to get a sort of depth to a painting that where when you build up the surface of the painting, you don't lose the layer that's underneath it. But what I found was when I was photographing this work for documentation, the camera was having difficulty capturing the different layers of the gel. What the camera was taking a picture of was basically the final layer, which in this one, you'll see it in a glimpse. It's when it's completely red. That's the final piece. And all of these pieces were done on cardboard. And I did them on cardboard because it's hardy, and I wanted the paint to interact with a rougher surface. I was also really into recycled materials as part of my art practice. And I photographed these paintings and found that the luminosity wasn't translating. So when you put them in the sunlight, all of these brilliant colors would come out. But when I photographed it, the photograph would only take the front layer. And so this painting this GIF, Moeru, this one's, yeah, Moeru, was done with only one color on the palette, and it was this sort of luminescent orange, reddish orange, that I tried to get to not look like just a block of orange, because there were many different tones and different tones and different, on the scale of hues, you know, different values of that hue that was being flattened by the photograph. So I was working around with it in Photoshop, and I was trying to do all kinds of manipulation to try to get those bottom layers to show. And Photoshop just did something. I think I tried to auto-tone the painting, and these blues and these greens and what you see at the bottom of the painting appeared. And it was almost like a moment of magic that I just saw before my eyes that had been created in Photoshop. And I saw this gleam and this gloss that was coming from the gloss gel that I had been using. And I thought, how do I get this to show that there's this original painting done in this single hue, and that there was then a development, or through processing, another image that came to light. And so I was fiddling around in trying to get the two to show as an animation, but I wanted that center to glow. I wanted to capture the original glow that was in the painting, that when you see it just on, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so actually that's a good place. Elaine, that's actually a great place to leave off since we've only got a certain amount of time. So thank you so much for that explanation. I don't know if Luise is here. Do we see Luise? Just going through.
Luise, are you here?
Is Luise here? Oh, yes, I see. Hi, Luise.
Ask him to unmute.
I don't think he's muted.
Oh, he's not. There he is. All right. So, do you want to introduce his work and then he'll go?
Yeah. So this is Luise Eru. His work, I just want to minimize this. His work is photo collages, which I just thought were so interesting. These were made from what he had said from found photographs, mined from libraries and free image banks. Just going to go down a little bit here. And Luise is based in Brazil, and a lot of his work touches on the plight and situation of Black people in Brazil and his own histories. I talk about this particular work. We're gonna wait for it to load. Called Building My House. He had mentioned that his mother and grandmother built their houses while working in quarries. So his work has a lot to do with beautiful images, commenting on this subject, but disrupting what he calls the violence surrounding him. So Luise, if you're there, I know that you had a translator originally, since your native language is Portuguese, but if you'd like to introduce yourself and say anything that you're comfortable with, that's fine. Not sure.
He hasn't unmuted, so.
Luise, if you want to unmute. Yeah, if you feel like introducing yourself, we can come back to you. Just type it right into the chat, or you can say something off mute. But so these works, I just thought were really remarkable. This was the first work that caught my attention, called Masculinity, and I thought this was such an interesting piece with the very painterly qualities that these collages, these digital collages have. And I know Luise works exclusively in Photoshop. So a lot of his pieces comment on social issues and things like of that nature. So I just thought they were very beautiful, and he uses a lot of botanical elements here, layering over. So these were very, very painterly to me. I'm just going to show that full screen here. I'm not sure. So we'll, yes, if Luise would like to say something.
He said in the chat he's gonna wait until next time when he has.
Oh, he's gonna wait. Okay, I don't have the chat open. Okay, thank you, Luise. And next we have Samhita, who I believe is here. If you would like to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your work.
Hi, I'm Samhita, and I'm based between New York and Bangalore, India. So the work that I have over here is sort of inspired by domestic interiors, abundant landscapes, and having spaces that are like filled with fruits and flowers and insects. It was kind of like, so my background is in printmaking and more traditional methods like ceramics, but I kind of found this method of collaging both hand-drawn and digital as a very comfortable way of like composing my work. I don't know how, I think what affects me most is the lack of tangibility, but as Emily said, like having it printed and it taking another form is something that I'm willing to explore. So the painting here that we have is called Kitchen Table and Strawberry Darts. It's just a very fun and lively atmosphere with fruits and inspired by food. And I think the next one.
Would you like, is this okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Insects on the chilly sofa. I kind of deconstruct. So I kind of have a very rigorous documentation process with photo, and I take a lot of photos and I use that as a foundation for my work. And I always like refer to them when I draw. So this is like my living room, and then I'm also piecing and collaging different parts of my house together and like kind of playing with the opacity, texture, yeah, and like stencils and having that layered juxtaposition between the mundane and also the ritualistic aspects. And I think the other one, this one was Starlight. It's actually like my friend's house, which I spend a lot of time in. And that's like her sofa, bedroom, and her bedside table. And I was just sort of playing around again with different forms and incorporating different objects that she had in her house and sort of like engaging in more like traditional craft and folk and pattern work, and looking at ways in which just like overall how traditional craft and folk work kind of reject traditional principles of making and weaving in some intricate and like intimate moments and looking at it as like an act of friendship or comfort and care. Yeah, I think that was it, right? The 3 pieces.
Yes, the 3 pieces. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's wonderful. Now, I know Colin Pollard could not make it today. I can just say something briefly about his work. One thing that really caught my attention about his work is that he generally is interested in digital space and the difference between digital space and real life physical space. And the pandemic, of course, really brought this into sharp focus. So these works are actually a combination of YouTube videos that he watched, travel videos, YouTube travel videos that he watched. And he took screenshots of glitches, of screen glitches, and made them into this composition that also includes marks that he made with permanent marker and acrylic, and he developed it into this painting, these digital paintings. And he has, again, this very strong interest in this idea of boundless space in the digital setting at the same time, during the pandemic, the irony of being stuck in quarantine. So you're looking at the outside on a YouTube travel video, but you're stuck in the physical space that you are in, which again came into sharp focus during the pandemic. Yes, and let me enlarge. This was the one I used on the press release. So you can really see those pixelated glitch marks. It's very layered, and I just thought this was such a fascinating example of a digital painting using conceptual underbases to create it. So we will have Colin do a talk at some point, as I mentioned, and he can go more into his art making process and how these paintings came about. As you can see, they were all done in the time span of the pandemic 2021. So I'll just keep going. So Donald Hargrove, who is based in Scotland, who I know is here. I will let you speak a bit about your work. So please go ahead.
Okay. Hi. So I'm Donald, and I'm from Glasgow, originally born in Zimbabwe. Just thank you very much, Emily, for having us in this exhibition. I feel really, this is a momentous occasion for me to be here, and I'd just like to make a comment about that before I even, a few years ago, I was fighting for my life in ICU, and so to even be here at all is a momentous occasion in and of itself, and maybe that was a catalyst for me to return to creativity. I've been working in the arts all of my life, but this is me kind of picking up my brushes, as it were, and so conditions have come together through lockdown, giving me time and space, and maybe the connection to nature, having the daily walks, and some sense of connection together with new toy of my iPad and drawing pad. And I began to explore, so I'm traditionally a painter, but I began to explore painting on a digital form. And so my paintings are about anything. They are a celebration, not just of life, but of being alive. And I would hope that the paintings convey that vital energy force that underlies the paints, brushes, and strokes that exist there. Yeah. So this first painting of the river in bloom. This painting went through a significant amount of changes. So I went around in circles with this painting to some degree. And I actually I had it, when it was drawn out, I had this idea. I'd seen this Andre Derain painting, and I just thought, I love the color of that trunk. And so I actually didn't have it in front of me, but just my memory of it, I pulled up this trunk as my first color in the painting, and started to build the painting from a color from another artist. And interestingly enough, a relative of mine who happens to be a historian spotted this. So I was quite pleased about that. Yeah, the painting's kind of found its way. It's really conveying energy, light, and color and exuberance. And although the brush strokes are fairly regular, pretty much throughout the whole painting. This is one of the earlier paintings that I did in this, but I actually returned to it at the hand-in. Just before I handed it in, I went back and did some more work on that picture. And Beach Moon. This is when we were up in traveling up north my wife and I, and one evening walking up and this spectacular view of these beech trees up on the hill. As I was working the paintings, it wasn't, somehow it just wasn't kind of, I actually ended up cutting the painting in half and flipping it. So there's a symmetry to the painting, which has been disguised with other things going on, but that's what's happened in this painting and somehow that symmetry worked together with the moon to give the sort of what the atmosphere that I felt on that day when we were looking at that scene of the balance of colors and textures.
Thank you so much, Donald, for that explanation. And I know at some point you had actually sent me a time-lapsed video of the creation of River in Bloom. So maybe we can go more into that during your talk, because it was fascinating to watch with the layers and what you took away and added back in. So that is something that was some really great sort of visual of the process. So next I'd like to introduce Adam Blitz. He's based in London, so he has a project here that he can talk about a bit, and there are 3 works. So Adam, if you'd like to go ahead and say something about your work, that would be great.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Emily?
Yes.
Great, great. Well, thank you. First of all, let me say that I am immensely grateful to the Derfner and to yourself for this opportunity. One of the dreams when I first put together the Digital Apamea project in 2018 was to experiment with a truly digital presentation. I don't just mean the medium or the media of various digital processes, but also to present it entirely in a digital capacity, which you have given me in part. So I'm very grateful to you for that. And yes, so hopefully my contribution to F11 sits somewhere between the modern and the ancient. I mean, I know that your museum is both ancient of Judaica and modern art. So hopefully I'm sitting somewhere between the two. My interest in Apamea, well, the Middle East at large, was primarily archaeological, and the material that you see in front of you is derived from archaeological material. And when I first visited Apamea, which was long before the Syrian conflict, I had no idea that there had even been a synagogue in this truly monumental Roman or Romano-Byzantine city. The synagogue was discovered in 1934 by a team of Belgian archaeologists. It was very short-lived. It was intentionally destroyed at a time when Christianity was becoming increasingly muscular. And the synagogue floor was buried beneath 2 latter strata associated with a much later church. And the foundations of the synagogue were intertwined with the ecclesiastical structure. So when the archaeologists found the mosaic floor, and I should say there was no textual evidence for this particular synagogue beforehand, the synagogue floor was 15 or so centimeters beneath that of the church's mosaic floor. And what happened was the archaeologists proceeded to slice and dice the segments that you see in front of you. And I should say they did not slice and dice them as they appear on this screen in their sections. And they divided up the fragments between museums in Damascus and in Brussels. But unfortunately, the excavation reports were destroyed in a fire in 1946, which actually completely wiped out an entire wing of the museum, including a dedicated Apamea gallery. So today, all we have are, we have a handful of black and white photographs, and some, but not all, of the fragments from the site. And the fragments are 4,000 kilometers apart from each other. So the thrill for me was trying to put the floor back together again and trying to figure out a suitable color scheme in the case of the Bima mosaic, which is, yep, I think you found it over there on the right-hand side. That one there, exactly. A suitable, and that one I didn't have to colorize, but that one was made up of 4 particular fragments within the museum, but there were a lot of loose tesserae and a lot of missing pieces. If we can just go back onto the main synagogue floor, the large image. Yep, there we go. And one of the things I was also interested in was, well, how can I present this such that we can actually read the inscriptions and at the same time understand the whole configuration that's going on in the synagogue in this space and how the floor was used. And ultimately, I decided to take the mosaics off the museum wall, figuratively speaking, and put them in a reconstructed floor in a 3D VR headset so that there was the original experience, or simulating the original experience of walking on the floor and to scale and how that all could be reimagined. You won't see that in this exhibition, but if viewers are interested, they're welcome to contact me and I can send them the information on the 3D VR aspect of it. But what you're looking at right now is the Bima mosaic, and that fragment is lost. All there is I think we have 3 black and white photographs of it and nothing in its entirety. So I used Photoshop and I used some photogrammetry to try and assemble it, and then to draw out different colors based on comparisons of mosaics from Apamea, but also other parts of Syria, Italy, and neighboring Turkey. So, that was a very different challenge from, say, putting the entire floor together, which you see in a slightly stylized capacity before you, but it's approximating the actual scale. I've tried to be as accurate with it as I could.
Yes, no, this was a fascinating project. Also, I linked, each artist's name is linked to their website. So any content that Adam has produced, I know there was a lecture, there was a lot of multimedia content can be found in that link. So you can go directly to that. So it's a little bit easier than having to give it directly to, so it's right here. So thank you so much, Adam, for speaking about this
thank you.
Fascinating project. Yes, thank you. So we're going to move on to Polina Protsenko, who I did see. There are 3 works that were featured here. And so if you'd like to speak a little bit about your process and how these came about, that would be great. So welcome, Polina.
Thank you, Emily. I wanted to piggyback about just saying thank you for having me and all of these artists. I feel inspired already by talking with so many artists. I am based in Los Angeles right now. I am an artist and an art teacher. Majority of my work is actually very performative, use the body as my medium a lot. And as many of us have experienced a change because of the pandemic, and it definitely was a hard push for me to even start making again because of the lack of collaboration and the public and the ability to perform together. So it, as many of us have experienced, a mental drain, and it actually took me moving somewhere like California during the pandemic to kind of regain some energy and interests to even begin creating again. Before that, I was in Boston. So these are very new pieces, all created during the pandemic as a way of dealing with what is happening and this new form of medium to be always on our computer and always in a digital platform, especially as an educator, all my classes being moved online. So it's a new relationship with people, a new relationship with my art. So as a kind of a healing tool for myself, I just started doing very miniature watercolors anytime I was in a public space, whether that is in a desert or the ocean, or, you know, in a crowded environment like the mall, wherever I may be. So once I create the watercolors, I would scan them and then reform them in Photoshop. And in my mind, I always kind of try to make it like this like blurry-eyed vision where I might not even be sure if it's in person or if it started out digitally or if it started out in painting. So I wanted a mix of all of these emotions and experiences that we are feeling during the pandemic, but the process is starting from a small scale watercolor painting that I can do on the go with my little watercolor set, and then scanning them and trying to transform them into this new digital world that we're living in. So it's definitely an experimental process. And for me to try to heal mentally and just get kind of creative again, especially during a time where my performance art has kind of mellowed out for now. But it has definitely been helping me as a mental and emotional process. And I'm thankful that I got an opportunity to share them as well as just meet other artists, because I'm sure all of us are feeling that lack of creativity without going to museums and shows. So even hearing from everyone has already gotten me kind of, you know, grooved back up. So thank you for having me.
Yes, it's my pleasure. That's one thing about this exhibition I'll say just quickly is, you know, I know enough about digital art. I have a lot of colleagues and friends who work in digital art, and I learned so much from seeing all of your work and the processes. It's just fascinating, the diversity of how everyone creates their digital work. So thank you, Polina. I'm going to Annie Lee, who is based in London, and she is represented by 3 smudge paintings. So I'm going to enlarge the first here, and then I'll let Annie speak a little bit about her work. So welcome, Annie.
Thanks. Thanks, Emily, and everyone. It's lovely to be here and to have this opportunity. Yeah, so I am based in London in England. I am a fine art student actually in a London university, but actually taking a year out because of the pandemic and the effects of online university, which I guess was the main inspiration and starting point for this body of work. I was in online university within like the 3rd term of when everything was going on, and it just wasn't a great learning experience really, from someone who specializes and works a lot with sculpture and very tactile materials. The physical experience of being with that artwork and seeing it and experiencing it is really like an integral part to what I do and what I'm interested in exploring. So it was quite hard for me to have to present work that is meant to be seen in a physical space but can only be seen digitally. And so I had lots of meetings, or not that many meetings because they were poorly organized, with tutors and fellow students and stuff. And a lot of the photography work that I was working on at the time was sort of distorted by both mine and tutors' very dirty kind of computer screens, or whatever they were viewing it on. So I thought that was just a really interesting thing that I'd never thought about before, in terms of what is not a physical, well, it is a physical experience, but yeah, viewing it virtually and how that kind of interplays with each other. So these are a set of 3 paintings which I created on Procreate on my iPad, and yeah, they are quite abstracted things initially. I guess they're not, you know, the most aesthetically eye-catching things, and depending as well on the brightness of your screen or what device you're viewing it on, I guess that influences your experience of the work as well. So for example, I was looking at these just on my phone beforehand, and my screen is normally really dark. So I was like, oh, these are not working. They're just like black images. But actually, if you turn your brightness up and see properly, there's lots of different smudges and marks that are represented abstractly. And I guess I'm interested as well in your experience, or the viewer's experience of these, and how your own smudges and dust on your computers or devices kind of interact with the actual artwork, and the ambiguity as to which one is which, and in a way your own dirt and grease and fingers actually complete the artwork and actually make it just add on to it even more. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I realized that there seems to be two strange little dots that have appeared on my share screen. So I'm just going to unshare and reshare.
Hopefully that'll take care of it.
Share screen.
Yes.
There we go. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So I'm unmuted. Thank you so much, Annie. Yes, I just thought these were so fascinating when I first saw them, and it reminded me a little bit of Ad Reinhardt's black paintings. And in the essay, I go into a quote somebody wrote about how, in order to appreciate and understand black paintings, monochromatic paintings like this, you have to sit with the work, and you have to be up close and sit with the work. So I just thought that idea of, if you're on desktop, enlarging it and being able to sit with the work and really see it up close, and the smudges and the details, was the best way to exhibit them. So that was part of the reason I just was very attracted to your work with this medium. So thank you so much for speaking about it. Next we have Carlos Torres Machado. He is works in Brooklyn, was born in Ecuador, and does these wonderful digital paintings that I believe originated in his series Data Centers. So I will let him go ahead and speak about what these are all about. Enlarge this one.
Who's streaming it live?
There we go.
Hi, Emily. How are you? Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for being
this
here.
exhibition. It was a, I received it with a great pleasure when you selected me, because yeah, it is like very according of what we are living, and especially, in my case, what I was living when I was, when everyone here in New York was locked down. I kind of get anxious to get to my studio at the beginning, because, I had everything there. I have my studio in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And when you are an artist, you try to find the resources that you have and available in order to do what you love doing, which is art. So after I had this, process of what I'm gonna do, I say, okay, so I have my computer, I have time, I'm gonna start exploring digital. And I found a lot of information, researching, and I got encouraged from a lot of artists that were, like from years ago doing this. So I just felt it, and I started doing it. And what I found is that I can evolve the series that I have, which is called Data Centers, that I started in 2015. And I started looking at the photographs that I have of the artworks that I developed, and I started to think, I can go 3D with my artworks, because one of the things that I noticed when I was doing my work, which is large scale, and you can see it in my website, is that my work was very flat. It was large. It was for me, it was a lovely composition, but when you were showing in the walls, it was flat. So I went to the corners of the galleries and museums and started to develop these data centers, still in large scale, but in the corners. So for me, it was a sense of the artwork hugging the viewer. But now that I have, and it's great that you have this as the first one, because this is the flattest one of the three that I had, which kind of shows the evolution of going from this flat surface to moving forward and bringing more, mobility, more depth into the work. So what I did is start working on that, on the structure, on the 3D, on giving perspective, and because the color was already there, the color patterns. So I started to develop these works in digital, and very fast after I put together like a bunch of pieces of this, we went out of lockdown, and I started to find place where to show it. And it was really, I was really surprised how much open is now museums, galleries, cultural centers to this kind of work. I just showed this in Korea, that I never showed it in Asia. So it's kind of goals accomplished by moving from something that at the beginning was really uncertain to find the ways to move you as an artist in your career with the tools that you have and keep developing things, creating things. So for me, from being something hard, it became something really lovely, and I'm enjoying now doing these paintings. I keep doing it now, even though that I can go to the studio. I'm still developing digital work, and I am moving to explore more things, now that I explored the depth, the perspective. Now I'm exploring more things in this series, and I'm going to start developing new series. So for me, it's like that the museums are moving to this kind of events to meet new artists, because I'm looking at artworks that are really amazing. I can see the people that sometimes if you are in another country, you can go to the openings of the events. So yeah, we are not in a physical space, but there are another advantage that this type of events are bringing to the table. And I think that for artists is a new era, and is very strong phase that we're looking on. And I think that new wave of enriching art through these venues like yours. So I really appreciate that the Derfner Judaica Museum is doing this type of event, and that I'm in it. So thank you.
Thank you, Carlos, so much for sharing your process, and your website is here. I do encourage visitors to have a look at Carlos's website and look at the physical versions of the data centers, because the relationship between the digital paintings and the very large scale gallery installation data centers really has this fascinating connection, especially the scale. So I do encourage everyone to do. Okay, so I see someone has raised their hand. So if you just, I said this at the beginning, but I know people have been coming in. If you could just type any questions you have into the chat box, we will take them at the end of the artist's talk and address those. So if you could just type them into the chat, and we will definitely get to them. So last but not least is Stefanie Wolfson. She has done this wonderful series called Plant Portraits that have a big conceptual underlying behind them about social media and the shallowness of this fixation on trend. So I'll let her speak a bit about what these plants are and what the concept behind them was. So I'll start with that. So Stefanie, if you want to go ahead, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's great. The show is wonderful. Everyone's work is beautiful. I'm so happy to be a part of it. This, as you said, the series is based on our social and ecological issues, mostly focusing on Instagram culture and what I call plant influencers, where you get someone who's really gorgeous and they pose with a plant and get like 1 million likes. And I wanted to focus on, is the trend really about the plants or is it just about the person? And do these people actually know like the ecological aspects of cultivating the plants and causing like farming issues? I've seen plants that are trending that go for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but they're in such high demand that cultivators can't keep up with them. And I'm using my platform to raise these issues. And yeah, I'm so bad at public speaking, guys. I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great. No problem. And it's informal and everyone is very interested. You know, you had spoken to me or mentioned that you had used the Latin names for
Yes.
each plant. If you want to touch on that, that might be interesting, since that was a specific intent.
Well, my background is actually in greenhouse growing. I've worked at plant stores for the last 6 years. And a lot of these people come in and they are looking for these plants that are on trend, but they just call them like these random names. And I'm like, but do you actually know how to take care of them? Like, you're just gonna kill a plant just for Instagram clout. Especially this one. That was a very popular plant. And like everyone comes in with problems about how to take care of them.
So they're this sort of disposable. Yes, I know.
Exactly,
Anyone on
disposable.
Instagram or vloggers, it's the aesthetic. Plant moms.
It's all about aesthetic. Plant moms. There's dudes with plants where it's just guys posing shirtless holding a plant.
Yes, I thought that it was also interesting that we're dealing with digital work. I know you also print your digital drawings and paintings, and you had a book that you made about this series, which is available, I think through your website, which I linked. But one thing I found interesting is that you're doing this digital work and social media has taken over our lives with screens far before the pandemic. So that intersection is just a very appropriate social commentary right now, but especially given, you know, the environmental issues that have come to the fore and, you know, everything that you've spoken about. So I think that was a really interesting part of this. One other thing that I might ask, you had spoken about the idea of portraiture and why you had put these plants against this blank background, this idea of traditional portraiture.
Right. So I had the idea of portraiture to focus solely on the plant and kind of make the viewer think like, is my interest actually about the plant or is it about the person with the plant? So the way I did it was kind of like looking into classical portraiture like Vermeer and Rembrandt and how their backgrounds were pretty stark and there's not much detail going on behind them. So you just focus solely on the important person they painted.
Thank you so much, Stefanie, for speaking about your fascinating works here. And there's a whole series. I chose these. The snake plant is one I think we all know, and it is not called a snake plant. It is called this very long Latin name I won't try to pronounce. So I think we're going to take some questions. So I'm going to go off full screen here and stop sharing my screen. And we have quite a few questions. I see quite a few. Oh, there's a lot.
Are they only to you? Is that why I'm not seeing?
No, they're in the chat.
I don't see the question. I just see lots of comments.
Oh, lots of comments. Well, if everyone wants to look at the chat, there are lots of comments about the work. Let's see if we had any questions. Let's see. Gorgeous.
There are people raising hands also, Emily.
Yeah. So who is raised? Let's see. Your work. Yeah. So who? I don't actually. Yeah. Do you want to? I can't see who's raising. Oh, I see. Okay.
I do. You have to. I don't know if they can hear me. So go ahead. Just ask your word.
Mordechai, I see your hand raising. Please go ahead.
Well, actually, I had written a comment that was just as I stood up and I moved to the right and left in Carlos's work, you can really see the three-dimensionality popping out at you. Polina's work was very interesting, very ethereal kind of stuff. I wish you could see it in real time or real life. It would be much more interesting. If you come to the East Coast again, let us know. All right, especially to New York. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Paulina has a question.
Who does?
Paulina.
Oh, Paulina. Paulina.
Portuguese.
Hello.
Mm-mm.
I just want to ask Samhita, like, to talk more about her process and just kind of like how she starts and how she does her work. I mean, her work is beautiful, so I just kind of want to hear more about her process. So
Yeah, I think I kind of like skipped over that. I kind of like went over it too quickly. So I kind of, so I first start off with a documentation process. So that's kind of like a process that's grounded in observation. So I kind of like scout different areas that seem interesting to draw. And using those pictures as a reference, I draw with like permanent markers as like an underdrawing, and then I kind of treat them as like puzzle pieces and kind of put them through Photoshop and then apply like texture, color to an extent, if I haven't added any like base with like markers, and just like play around and like compose my images. And that's pretty much the process.
cool. Thank you so much. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You can raise your hand at this point since we're done with the actual logistics of speaking. So anything in the chat? Well, as I said, the catalog, which is linked, goes more into detail about each artist and has illustrations, downloadable as a PDF. And this show will be on view online until August 8th under the same URL, very straightforward. So please let your friends and colleagues know if they'd like to view the exhibition. And please do look at all of the artists' websites and Instagrams, because I believe everyone here is posting their work on a regular basis. So it's wonderful to keep up with what they're doing. So unless anyone has any other questions for the artists or for me, I guess we will call it a day, and thank you so much. Also, as I said, have a look at our website for announcements of the artist talks, the dates when that will be, and there will probably be a group of maybe 3 artists to go more into depth about their work with, you know, visual aids or whatever the case may be. So Thank you so much for coming all, and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. It was nice meeting everyone.
Thank you, Emily. Brilliant.